Thank you, Cliff. So namaste. Good to be with all of you. And we had a lovely service yesterday in honoring Dave Shepard. It was a beautiful time to get together and just relish in who he was and kind of settle that space within our heart to know that life goes on and life is life. And this is what we're really looking to do in all of our conversations on a Sunday morning, is to cultivate this awareness of deeper life. Because when we see through the false appearances of change, we realize the changeless. And that's who we really are. That's the one looking. And so we're going to really uncover this seer, witness consciousness today. We're going to play in the world of Chan Buddhism, also in its Japanese form, Zen Buddhism. And I think you'll love this because one of the hallmark features of Chan, or Zen, is the immediacy of the awakened mind. It's always here, always now, always brilliant, always enlightened. It takes no time at all because it never ceases to be what it is eternally. And in the teachings of Chan Buddhism, you are at this core essence of the awakened mind and just don't know it. And so the entirety of the Zen or Chan canon of teachings is to uncover that in your experience, using language, using techniques that range from meditation to slaps in the face. So if anybody wants to slap, just raise your hand. I'll be happy to comply. But this is to jar you out of the conceptual cages and false belief systems that we can cocoon ourselves with, which keep us from realizing the deeper life. And then we fret about and we fear and we have anxiety because we're living from a false center. And this false center is normally how we consider ourselves, this body form and the name and the story attached to it. And so one of the things that Chan teachers or Chan masters are really ruthless in is having you get to a place where you can really look and see you're not the false center, you're not your story, and you're not something that can die. And so when you find this, you find the peace, you find the joy, you find the power that is completely missing from the false center of the ego identity. And it's this ego identity that wants it. Really does. It's one of the things that brings us here, right? We still identify as the false ego, most of us. And when we come here, we're really looking for the completion of this false ego, because the false ego knows it's missing something major, but it's also deluded. It's quite confused as to where to find this completion. And the way that the false ego mind operates instinctually, see, this goes below the threshold of rational thinking and consideration. This is instinct. The way that the false ego operates is it pushes your attention out into the world of objects and forms in hopes to find what it knows inherently is a lack within itself. And so it's seeking in the outer world what it can never find in order to complete itself. And so what Zen or Chan does, as many great spiritual techniques and philosophies would do, is it points you back to the immediacy of your mind in this moment and has you through this stilling and calming experience of, just sitting, or what we could call meditation. But it's really just sitting and looking and feeling into who you are in the hopes to find that eternal kernel that doesn't come and go with each thought or wave of emotion. There's something stable and sure of you in this instant. And when you find that and you abide as that, you will never go searching outside of yourself again. and you will never fear death again. Because you'll know yourself not as the false center of false ego, but you'll know yourself as life itself. And so we're going to really look into this today. We're going to go through some really lovely teachings, so I hope you enjoy the ride. And a welcome to everybody joining us on Facebook. It's good to have you on board. So here we go. We want to simply just intone the bell. And the bell within these contemplative traditions is really a way of coming back to the present moment. So let this bell kind of take you back into the spaciousness of your breath, and allow the waves of the bell to move through your body and begin to really feel into your body. This is one of the beautiful teachings of Chan Buddhism. It doesn't run away from the body into some heady space. It anchors you into the felt experience of your bones and your blood, because this too is the enlightened self. So you want to just rest deeply into the deep tissues and bones of your body and the deeper flow of your breath. And so in preparing for our journey inward, we want to ground our attention into the flow of breath. Become increasingly more concentrated and one-pointed in the felt experience of the breath current going in and going out. And as we will see, this breath current really takes us back into the heart of reality. This breath current is an echo or a direct expression of the deep mystery, the Tao. And so we just want to let all conceptual thoughts go, all mental images go, and simply melt into the breath current as pure awareness. And if you're doing this with any measure of success, you'll find that the breath current has subtleties to it. There is the coarse chemical, physiological dimension of the breath, the body biological breathing. And that is the antechamber to the temple. So you're coming in at the chemical, biological level. And feel that, embrace that, know that essence of your deeper biological life. Be grateful for it. And as you continue to ride this pulse of breath, there is another level of deeper, subtler life current that you'll begin to suss out. This would be the level of chi or prana, life force energy that's more electromagnetic, a subtler vibration for a subtler body, astral body, etheric body, energy body, that is also nested within the biological, just at a deeper, higher frequency domain. Feel that, open to that subtle body dimension. This subtle dimension is also the dimension of feelings and emotions. So your emotions breathe. They come into experience or presence. They abide a little while. And like the breath, they subside and go back into the silent ground. So a good way of connecting to the subtle dimension is feeling into feelings and feeling into emotions. They arise within a subtle dimension. And they breathe. And as you enter more rarefied places within the temple of breath, you'll come to a mental dimension where your mental body is breathing. Thoughts come into presence as you inhale, and thoughts subside as you exhale. The mental body is breathing. We want to remain the witness, not getting caught in the cinema of thoughts, in the cinema of emotions or biological states, but witnessing these subtler and subtler layers of the breath current, which is taking us back into the heart of Tao, the heart of your own mystery. So the breath is like this golden thread connecting the pearls of thought dimension, emotional subtle body dimension, and physical dimension. They are all woven on the cord of breath or primal chi. They are manifestations of primal, divine life force energy. Now simply subside within the shining, luminous, mirror-like quality of your witnessing consciousness, this awareness by which you were observing thoughts, emotions, and body. Now observe the observer. Turn your attention fully onto attention. This is where all things subside and you come back to the ground, the no thing, the no mind. Here we are, always, in this timeless, spaceless, dimensionless state of awareness. Embrace it. Be grateful. And attempt to enter as deeply and fully as you can into this mirror-like, spacious awareness. And if there's any measure of success here, you'll begin to feel your attention, your energy presence sort of moving out into space, where you're no longer isolated within a fixed form, but you're more of the space in which all forms are arising. And this space permeates within your body, and it permeates outside of your body. It permeates the floors and the shoes and the chairs and all other bodies. You're interpenetrating all space. And feel wherever you may encounter a block, such as the back body, that your attention can go into these spaces so that your space-like nature can go in all directions. Get a taste of that this morning. And this too is connected to the flow or current of breath at the most primal dimension. This is the Buddha breathing. So know that this is going on every instant. This Buddha nature, this primal ground, and all of the layers of self-expression nested within one another, thoughts, emotions, and body, all stitched and woven together with the sutra or the thread of divine breath. And so we explore today a different vantage point of this ordinary, extraordinary being. And as you bring your hands to heart, just feel this jewel essence within the center of the heart, this Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha. This ground of the divine moment. And be willing to see this in all beings, starting in this room, that everyone has this Buddha nature, this divine jewel, this Christ mind. Everyone, everywhere, always. And it's this we bow to when we say or feel Namaste. So let's uncover this jewel in greater clarity, shall we? So this is a wonderful book, one of my favorite books on the subject of Chan, relatively recently published, China Root. If you're interested in meditation, Buddhism, a deep looking into your own nature, highly recommend this. It's written by David Hinton. He's a scholar of classical Chinese and Chinese philosophy, and does an amazing job of getting to the root of what the early Chan Zen tradition was about. And one of the ways that we're going to look at it today might alter, if you are familiar with this teaching of Zen, it will alter the way that you had learned it. Because one of the critiques that David Hinton presents in this book is that the original layer of Taoism, which was very much at the core of early Zen, or Chan, had quickly been forgotten. And so what that means, practically speaking, is we began to lose our root in terms of this teaching. We begin to get lost in more of a philosophical rather than an actual experiential interpretation of this tradition. So let's just jump in. You'll see what I mean. What happens if we dismantle all of our human conceptual constructions? All of the explanations and assumptions that structure consciousness and orient us and define us as centers of identity. To do that, not in the abstract, but at the level of immediate experience, what would that leave us? What might we discover about ourselves at levels deeper than the contingent histories and thoughts that define us as identity centers? And what would it mean about the texture of everyday experience? This dismantling is the adventure of Chan, as originally practiced in ancient China. And its primary revelation is the larger self, or original nature, that remains after the deconstruction. This is something we keep coming back to every week. If you love yourself, you'll lose yourself. If you deny yourself, you'll find yourself. So, Lao Tzu said, if you don't lose yourself, how will you ever find yourself? It's the same teaching that we're seeing across cultures. There has to be a deconstruction first, a clearing away of the blocks that are blocking you from love's presence, if you follow the teachings of A Course in Miracles. Then you enter into your original self, which is an all-encompassing state of love bliss. And it's here now. This is the joy of the adventure. You don't have to go anywhere for it. It's being blocked through these subtle, misdirected cues that originate from the identity center. Based on our conditioning, our programming, our belief systems, we are habitually taking ourselves out of the love bliss of divine knowledge in heaven, if you will. That's why, again, you've heard this said many times if you attend these services. Jesus in A Course in Miracles, heaven is here. There is nowhere else. Heaven is now. There is no other time. So we are in a habit, a delusional habit, of taking ourselves out of heaven in the here and the now. And to feel bad for doing that is part of the delusion. Only the false identity center can feel bad for taking you out of heaven. And it's part of the protective device of the identity center. It wants to survive. It can't survive in the here and now of heaven because the original self will replace that. in your awareness. You'll simply laugh away the mirage. But there's something weird about the mirage. It has a survival instinct. And so it will make you feel bad for taking yourself habitually out of your original nature in hopes that you'll buy that thought process and feel bad. Once you feel bad for doing this, guilty, wrong, whatever, not enough, you will be the identity center. You'll be the false ego. And then you're just buying another way that it's maintaining its survival. So we want to watch that as we go through this deconstruction process this morning. The awakening that Chan cultivated was seeing original nature. In Japanese, kensho. Maybe you've heard this term. And in cultivating this awakening, Chan's sage masters operated like a wrecking crew, disassembling every possible story or explanation, idea or assumption or certainty. The Chan conceptual world sounds like a constellation of answers, a clear account of consciousness and cosmos and their interrelation. And it is. So you're going to get a philosophy here. You're going to get explanations and pointers and insights into the nature of consciousness and the nature of cosmos as it's seen through the lens of Chan Buddhism. But here's the key, something we also mention quite often on Sunday. But in the end, Chan dismantles all of our answers, including its own, to leave a new way of being, free of concepts. That's why Chan has been considered or compared to soap. So soap is like clean grease. You're putting grease on your dirt, deconstructing the dirty mind, clearing the mirror of the dirty mind through this grease that you have to put on. But then you wash it off. You don't leave the grease on. So the Chan philosophy, any transformative teaching, is like soap. It goes on to remove both the dirt and itself. A good illustration of this is told within the legend of Dogen, who is one of the great Japanese Zen masters. And he went to China in the 1200s to study Chan, because Japan didn't have a fully developed Zen tradition yet at this time. Dogen really kind of brought that to Japan. So in this Chinese temple, Dogen is sitting with the Chan master. And the Chan master has him working in the meditation on what's called the Koan. You've probably heard of this, right? A koan is a way of focusing the mind so that you can burrow through, cut through all of these appearances and false assumptions and stories and beliefs to get to that radiant nature, your original nature, and see it and be it. So the koan serves that technique or function for the mind. And Dogen's sitting there with the koan, drop body, drop mind. So keep sitting, looking deeply, feeling deeply, getting the impact of what drop body, drop mind will have if you keep heating it up and burning through. Whatever is bodily sensations, body memories, body awareness, drop. Whatever is mind-generated, emotions, thoughts, stories, memories, images, drop. You empty the cup entirely. Drop body, drop mind. Very helpful tool. So in this tradition, Dogen heats it up till he burns through the false coverings that were hiding his original nature. Having thought himself fully cooked, he goes to see the Zen master, which is part of this ritual and that tradition, where you make your formal bows, you enter the room, and you have a one-on-one interview, where the Zen master then gets to see the progress in your practice. And Dogen enters, lights incense, makes his formal bows, and sits before the Zen master, and he says, "Body and mind dropped." And the Zen master is seeing Dogen and lets Dogen make his presentation. And as Dogen is getting up to leave the room, he says, "Now drop body and mind dropped." It's the soap. You got to get rid of the soap now. You use the tool, now throw the tool away. And you get to a place where you're freed from all things. And you see your original nature before all things were. So this is the deconstruction that goes on. So that when you then come to this radiant state of clear seeing, you know who you are. You know the nature of your mind. Then you'll see that everything is arising as an expression of this deeper original nature that we are. And we'll get more into that. So just keeping this way of approach in mind, because once you begin to enter this deeper state, like we looked at a couple of weeks ago, we go through this process of opening to our higher potential, you're going to see that everything you've always wanted, everything that you've been trying to attract or manifest in your spiritual practices and your, laws of attraction groups or whatever it is that have been kind of originating from the identity center. You'll find it here and much, much more. So this is what in Buddhism is called the wish-fulfilling jewel. You'll realize, as Jesus says in A Course in Miracles, you both are and have everything. The false identity center cuts you off from seeing this. And that's why you feel the lack. Because deeper within you, you know you're the totality. You know you have everything. You know you are everything. So on that note, we'll read a little poem from Hakuin Zenji. Hakuin, one of the great revivalists of Japanese Zen, lived in the 1700s. And this is a poem called the Song of Zazen. Zazen, if you're not familiar, is really just the sitting practice of Zen, where you're looking into the nature of yourself. So it's a stopping of all else, and you're sitting and deeply looking. Zazen. So here's the Song of Zazen. Sentient beings are primarily all Buddhas. It is like ice and water. Apart from water, no ice can exist. Outside sentient beings, where do we find Buddhas? So what he's saying right now is, you as a sentient being are no different than the Buddha. What happens is, the Buddhas are like water, flowing, and sentient beings are like ice, frozen, constricted, hardened. So this deconstruction process melts your ice. And you naturally return to the flow. And that flow in Chinese is Tao. You enter the sea. And you realize that you are a direct and immediate expression of Tao. You are Buddha. Just having been frozen with opinions and judgments and beliefs and false ideas and unfulfilled desires and held on grievances and all these things that freeze you. And when you begin to directly look into the nature of your mind, you realize, this isn't me, this isn't me, this isn't me, that wasn't me, that was a mistake, I didn't understand that. This is all being seen from the false reference point of a center that doesn't really exist the way I believed it did. Once I begin to really look at what makes up my story of myself, it begins to be undone. Once you start to really examine it, that's Zazen. You begin to look at these assumptions, these unexamined beliefs of what you thought about yourself, what you thought about the way the world was. You look. This is what makes it so convincing. You directly see. And then you melt. Not knowing how near the truth is, we seek it far away. What pity. We are like a man who in the midst of water cries in thirst so imploringly. We are like the son of a rich man who wandered away among the poor. We're going to see this more directly in a little while. This son of a rich man wandering away among the poor is getting lost in appearances, not realizing that you're actually the one generating them. You're the origin moment. You are the Buddha nature. You are and have everything. Everything is actually an expression of your divine or Buddha consciousness, who you are. The one listening right now is doing all of this, just unaware. Does that thrill the heart? Is there something, a deeper chord in you that may be vibrating to this? That we wander away among the poor, that we cry in thirst so imploringly, even though we have and are everything. The reason why we transmigrate through the sixth world is that we are lost in the darkness of ignorance, going astray further and further in the darkness. When are we able to be free from birth and death? And then he goes into praising Zazen. As for Zazen practice in the Mahayana, we have no words to praise it fully. The virtues of perfection, such as charity, morality, and the invocation of the Buddha's name, confession, and ascetic discipline, and many other good deeds of merit, all these return into this. So what he's saying here is, who you really are, you may help yourself find it by acting virtuously and putting in the practices of a certain religion or spiritual discipline. But eventually, when you follow it all the way back to the origin point where Zazen uncovers it, and in your direct experience, you realize all virtues, all good deeds, all merit can only bring you to this. This is it. You're not going to find it in the good deeds and the merit-producing actions out in the world that will just perpetuate the false center. Bring it back. Drop body and mind. Even those who have practiced Zazen for just one sitting will see all their evil karma erased. Nowhere will they find evil paths, but the Pure Land will be near at hand. With a reverential heart, if we listen to this truth even once and praise it and gladly embrace it, we will surely be blessed most infinitely. But if we concentrate within and testify to the truth that self-nature is no nature, we have really gone beyond foolish talk. So not getting lost in words, uncovering the real self by realizing that no self is self. Drop body, drop mind. Deconstruct everything that you think and think you are. Then you'll find yourself. To regard, then he says, the gate of the oneness of cause and effect is opened. The path of non-duality runs straight ahead. So the gate of oneness, the oneness of cause and effect, means that I'm the cause and the effects are the effects of my own intentions, desires, and thoughts. What I'm experiencing reflected out in the outer world are the intentions, desires, and thoughts that I'm generating in the inner world. And we're going to see how in the Chinese Chan tradition, how incredibly vivid this teaching will be. That we are always at this origin moment where the all-embracing nature of the Tao, this divine being, Father God, Mother God, is giving rise to 10,000 things. We're at that juncture point where the infinite potential of the Tao gets channeled through each one of our experiences of intentionality, desire, and thoughts. All sentient beings have this gift to be the great magicians of channeling chi, channeling divine energy, and manifesting their world instant by instant. And when you come back to being in the origin moment, you realize you're doing this. That's why, again, in A Course in Miracles, Jesus is saying you're either co-creating with all of life or you're miscreating. You're always creating. You're always at the origin moment. But if you're ignorant of being at the origin moment and have identified as this false center, this ego, you're channeling chi in a very distorted way. And your life will have distortion and suffering. So we're deconstructing that so that we can come back to the clarity and the true nature that will channel chi and manifest your loving expressions, your beauty, your joy, your abundance, because that's your spiritual inheritance. So to regard the form of no form as form, whether going or returning, we cannot be any place else. And that's an interesting turn of phrase. Whether going or returning, whether going into birth or returning from life, whether you're being born or you're dying. Listen to this. We cannot be any place else. You never leave your source. Again, A Course in Miracles. Ideas leave not their source. We read it in Dave's service yesterday, that poem from Rumi. The only ones who suffer in life are those that don't realize that this is a dream. And what Rumi is saying is, you're like someone who fell asleep in one town and you're dreaming you're in another town. You never leave the place where you fell asleep. You're always at the origin moment. That's your nature. You can't leave it. You can ignore it. Once you ignore it, then you start to miscreate and you buy into the 10,000 things and you get lost in the poverty of the illusions and frantic in trying to find your way back. You never left. Deconstruct. That's the answer. You can't quell the anxiety by trying to fix it in another form. When you see the form of no form as form, then you realize that everything is simply an expression of this deeper Tao. This is the power of Tao, the power of your own mind manifesting as the 10,000 things. Abide in the center. Abide in the origin moment. This is what the practice of meditation does. To regard the thought of no thought as thought, whether singing or dancing, we are the voice of the Dharma. How boundless the cleared sky of samadhi. How transparent the perfect moonlight of the fourfold wisdom. At this moment, what more need we seek? As the truth eternally reveals itself, this very place is the lotus land of purity. This very body is the body of the Buddha. Heaven is here. There is nowhere else. Heaven is now. So on that note that we were just going into, this idea of being at the origin moment, in the understanding of Chan Buddhism or Taoism, there is something called the Tao and the De. So that famous book by Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching, it is Tao De Jing. The way, Tao, and its power, De. The power is this primal chi, the Shakti, Holy Spirit, that is manifesting from the Tao. Now what makes this really graspable is where we're going next. What he describes in this book that really opens it up, I hope for you, is that the Tao is what can be considered absence, no thing, no form, no thought, no mind, nothing that has come into expression yet. It is pregnant. It is potential. It is limitless potentiality. When it begins to express itself, which it naturally does every instant, it's giving rise from the absence or pure potentiality to presence. Chairs have presence. Hair has presence. Face masks have presence. We just instinctually know this. Shoes have presence. Voice has presence. Thoughts have presence. Emotions have presence. They are manifesting chi. This is the Da. This is the power. And it never leaves its source. So whatever's manifesting as presence, the 10,000 things, lights, ceiling, doors, windows, trees, grass, guys, gals, it's primal chi. And when we abide in the origin moment, we never lose sight of who we are as the Tao. And so we are realizing in this moment together, hopefully, in this unity consciousness, that this is us experiencing itself in the 10,000 things. This making sense? So this is what he's calling absence burgeoning forth into presence. Now, this is where we as distinct beings have a very unique and blessed place within this experience. That mind, heart-mind, as the Chinese refer to it, has intentionality, desire, meaning, insight, thought, intelligence. Right? So he says here, the natural Western assumption would be that these things refer uniquely to human consciousness, but mind or heart-mind is also often used philosophically in describing both the non-human and the human world. So remember that poem we read, all sentient beings are Buddhas. So all sentient beings have insight, thought, intelligence, intentionality. Again, very different from our Western conditioning. So this experience then has us shaping the ongoing cosmological process of change and transformation. So the Tao is always manifesting presence, which is always changing. It's in a flow. And through our intentionality, through our desires, through our thoughts, we shape it. And we're doing this consciously or unconsciously. Each particular thing, that means all sentient life, at its very origin, has its own heart-mind. Right? Anything with awareness has heart-mind. And the whole cosmos is self-aware. So heart-mind can therefore be described as intentionality, intelligence, desire, infusing Tao. Right? Infusing it with what you want to see, what you want to experience, what you want to manifest. And so you're shaping and giving forth this intentionality into presence. Try it on. You'll see it manifesting in your life. What you want to see, you will see. If you're in a state of ignorance and identifying with that false ego, what you want to see will be more discord, upset, helplessness, victimization. And we had a class a couple weeks ago where in A Course in Miracles, there's that section called The Secret to Salvation. It's such a blockbuster of a teaching. He says the secret to salvation is that you're doing all of this to yourself. No matter what the form, still is this true. So this gets us back to the fact that we're always at the origin moment, infusing primal chi, divine power, psychic energy into what we want to see manifesting in the world of presence. I don't find anything more thrilling than this. I don't know about you. This deconstructs and clears away all of the fluff. So I had said that in the tradition of Chan, there is the practice of meditation where you sit quietly and you find your breath and you look deeply into what's arising. And then there is, in that experience of meditation, you can also work with the Koan, which is a case study from an interaction between a Zen master and somebody else that gives you the flash of the pointing to the moon. Like, look into this case situation and suss out what the master was getting at so that you can see clearer into your own nature. Right? So this is the Blue Cliff record. It's one of the great collections of koans in Zen Buddhism. And we're going to just look briefly at a couple of situations. This one is the 46th case, and it goes something like this. Master Ching Ching asked a monk, "What sound is that outside the gate?" The monk said, "The sound of raindrops." Ching said, "Sentient beings are inverted. They lose themselves and follow after things." What's the sound outside the gate? The monk answered, "Raindrops." The master said, "Sentient beings are inverted." What does that mean? They chase after things. They don't know they're giving rise to all things. They have it backwards or upside down. You're the dreamer, not the dream. When we identify as ordinary sentient beings, we are simply identifying as the dream figure that we're calling our identity center. John, Rich, Lisa. That's inverted. And we get lost in things as long as we hold to this as the center of the self. He says, when we let go of that false center, we can hear through the rain and realize that the rain is an expression, it's a presence of the primal chi. And we come back to ourselves, knowing that we're at that origin moment. This takes practice. It's an immediate realization, but we have to undergo a deconstruction. So over the past hour or so, I think we all have a struggle in trying to hear this kind of a message through the lens of the conditioned self. And the more we're gripped to the conditioned self, the more upsetting the message. Because that conditioned self is going to be deconstructed in order to understand this message. So, on that note, I invite you to continue this conversation with me at A Course in Miracles tomorrow night. It is at 7:15 in the classroom here. Blue bag's going to go around, and the church thanks you for your contribution, as do I. Any thoughts, questions here? George? We need it for the people on Facebook.
I could use some help understanding. I'm hearing the comparison or the paralleling of awareness and sentience. You use the term sentient beings a lot. Can you help me understand? I mean, sentient beings. How far do you take this to a rock?
Yes. Well, if we're in the space of this coming back to ourselves, we'll realize that the rock is actually an expression of awareness. So it doesn't exist apart from itself. We call the thing a rock, and this is a good example of how we get lost in things. We name them. And as soon as we name them, we carve them out of the totality, and we think they exist apart from it as this separate thing, when in fact it's really just presence, or the unity of being expressing itself as rock. But because we're carved out as a separate thing that we've labeled with all of these words and stories and concepts, there's a separate sentient self called George looking at a separate sentient thing called rock. And there won't be any Zen in that experience. It's frozen. George is frozen. Rock is frozen. Deconstruct George, and George flows back into the heart of reality, and we'll see the rock as it truly is. That's what we're saying. We'll bless the offering. We did some powerlifting here this morning, yes? We're very grateful for the offering. We bless it. We intend that it goes into the world as energy to liberate and bring all beings to true wisdom and happiness. And so it is. Amen. Okay, everybody. I think we're getting shut off of Facebook at this point. Is there any final thoughts that you did want to share before we end service? Okay, no thought, no mind, no self. Okay, in that moment that we are always in, let's stand and honor it with the unity prayer. Coming back to the quiet center within the heart, the true origin, a place we've never left. And in this state of seeing our original nature, we know that the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful